Welcome to the Perry Stone YouTube channel. Please be sure and subscribe and give us a thumbs up on these teachings, because the next several series that we're going to do, we're going to deal with the armor of God. Now, not in length, probably a 5 to 8 minute mini word that's going to help you understand the battles that we are now in. Now, the Apostle Paul in Ephesians 6 lists the armor of God by comparing the armor on a Roman soldier to pieces of armor that a believer must put on in order to fight the good fight of faith. One of the weapons he talks about was the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Back in the time of the Apostle Paul, the Roman soldiers would wear a sword. It was a required piece of equipment in case there was an uprising or they were called into battle. They had to carry with them at all times a particular sword. Now, in the Roman time, there were 4 known swords. One was called the Pompey sword, one was the Calvary sword, one was a Spanish sword that they came up with and they began to make when they saw the Spanish in Spain fighting in a battle, a close-up battle. But in the Bible, where it talks about the sword of the Spirit, it's talking about a sword that this is an exact replica of it. Of course, it was kept in a leather sheath, and when you pull it out, and this one's a little rusty, by the way, this replica is, but it had, and I'm handling it here because it's not sharp, it's very dull, wooden handle here, a place to grip for your fingers to grip, so where you could hold on to it without slipping. And of course, there was up at the top, your hand would not slip in battle. But the part that I want to share with you is in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 12, the Word of God. Now, we do know Ephesians 6 says the sword of the Spirit is the Word of God. The Word of God is quick and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword. Now, in Greek, the word two-edged there is from a Greek word that means having 2 mouths, a 2-mouthed sword. Now, obviously, and again, this is dull, that's the only reason I'm handling it here. This is the type of sword that Paul would have been talking about. And it was a sword that was about a little over 2 feet long. And this particular sword had 2 blades to it. Now, some swords have 1 blade, but this one had 2 blades with a point. The point was always very sharp for piercing, for gouging, we might say. Now, I want to talk to you about the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Now, I have before me a New Testament. We know that the Bible has 66 books in it, but this is the 27 books of the New Testament. Now, in Paul's day, there was no New Testament. There was only what we call the Old Testament, which in our Bible goes from the book of Genesis to the book of Malachi. There's a 400-year gap between the prophet Malachi to the time of John the Baptist. The apostles wrote 4 Gospels. Luke wrote the book of Acts. Paul wrote 14 letters. John wrote the book of Revelation. There's also 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Colossians, etc. These books that make up the Bible. Now, the entire Bible is the sword of the Spirit. However, when you talk about the Word of God in Greek, it's 2 Greek words used in the New Testament, the word logos and the word rhema. The word logos is the doctrine, the teaching that you read. The word rhema is, as W.E. Vine says, a specific word given from the Lord for a specific situation, for a specific time, that is quickened to you. Now, let me go back to the sword and show you how that our subject is, your sword is too dull. That's what I've titled, warning, your sword is too dull. Because if this sword becomes dull, it becomes useless in the time of conflict, both in the natural world in the time of the Roman Empire and also in the realm of the Spirit. Now, what makes this, according to Hebrews 4 and 12, a 2-mouthed sword has to do with 1 blade is formed in the sword of the Spirit when the Bible was spoken to the prophets and they penned it on paper. That is only 1 edge of the sword. Now, what makes it a weapon of power is when you begin to take that part which has been written down from the mouth of God to the prophets and they penned it. You take that part, which is our Bible, and it's quickened or made alive to you in the form of a rhema word. Then you begin to speak out of your mouth not only the scriptures, the way Jesus did when he was tempted by the devil in Luke 4 and Matthew 4, but when you begin to speak it out, you are the person that puts the actual second blade on this 2-mouthed sword. Thus, one blade comes from the mouth of God, and the other blade comes from your mouth. The scriptures were intended to be sung. The Psalms, for example, were the song book of ancient Israel. They were intended to be sung, but the scriptures were not just meant to be read, they were meant to be spoken. God told Moses when he wrote the Torah to rehearse it before the people. And they would stand before the people and they would speak the word. They would speak the word in the synagogues. And so the word of God must be spoken out of your mouth. If the Bible simply remains on your file cabinet or your coffee table or the top of your television, it does you no good, because at that point all it is leather or artificial leather, in some cases, with paper and printed ink. However, if you take what is written and get it in your heart, it has to come from your heart, and speak it out of your mouth, it becomes the two-edged sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, that divides the soul from the spirit, the joint from the marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart. You cannot let your sword, the word that you speak, become dull. It becomes dull when you don't speak the word. It becomes dull when you don't pray and use the promises written in the word and speak them out. The speaking part is the sharpness of the blade. If you don't speak the word, if you talk about the word and you mention about how God and the Bible and the word, that's great. But that doesn't create the weapon. The weapon is created when it gets in your heart and then it is spoken out of your mouth. Then it becomes a powerful weapon to use against the enemy. So it's very important that you speak the word, and that becomes the sword of the Spirit in Ephesians 6 that defeats the powers of the enemy. Now, I have a very special advertisement coming up. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and be watching the rest of our series as we introduce a new weapon in each YouTube video. Please give me your undivided attention. Many months ago, I began to hear secular economists announce a new global reset was coming. That's when I heard this phrase in my spirit, the American apocalyptic reset. For several weeks, I woke up early and began receiving a series of stunning prophetic downloads that I penned and now have placed them all in my brand new prophetic book, America's Apocalyptic Reset. This book is a must-read for all Christians, for all of those who love Bible prophecy, for conservative Americans and American patriots. The 19 chapters go extremely deep into exposing the agenda now being secretly plotted and to be publicly forced upon us, the American people, and how we can counter it. I discovered some very stunning ancient prophetic parallels and patterns, some that go back 4,000 years, that are repeating themselves in the United States right now. I deal with America's great Babel reset and the planned persecution of Christians, America's self-curse that will eventually bring judgment upon the nation, the coming Jezebel clash, the woman who will be president, how she would react and wisely resist corrupt governments. I reveal the unique Silicon Valley parallels and also go into the plans to bankrupt, then reset America economically. Also, I talk about how to function when the church must go underground. I received a very unique revelation concerning President Trump and a pattern that's found in history. There's a chapter also that I deal with how did the prophets get it wrong, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the most significant prophetic book in the history of my ministry, especially in the time that we're in, but that's not all. I'm also including my most recent inside information prophetic briefing on 2 audio CDs. It's 2 hours in length, and I will release detailed information that I cannot, and I want you to hear me, I cannot nor will I share this on social media or on television, as absolutely in the climate that we're now in, a lot of this information would be targeted for being blocked and banned if it was made public and not done in this private setting that we're doing it in. These 2 hours contain biblical, political, national, and international revelation and information that I am sure that many of you have not been aware of. It is for truth lovers only. I want you to order right now this prophetic resource package, my brand new book, The Apocalyptic Reset, and the 2-hour prophetic CDs by going online at perrystone.org or calling 1-888-21-BREAD, or write me at Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. Now, we're making this available for your donation of $35 or more, and you can request the offer APR-140. That's APR-140. I'm going to unmask the radical globalists and individuals who have set out to oppose and silence Christians, silence patriots, and shut the mouth of conservatives. And we will show you in the book what we can do when we unite together. We are looking forward to getting this into your hands.